History is full of hidden secrets, events so shocking, governments, leaders, and entire organizations have gone to extraordinary lengths to cover them up. But as they say, the truth always comes out, eventually. From global conspiracies to mind-blowing cover-ups that went undetected for decades, we're counting down the top 10 biggest cover-ups in history. Stick with us to the end, because what we reveal in the number one spot is out of this world. Let's dive in. 10. The Manhattan Project from 1942 to 1946, creating the world's deadliest weapon in total secrecy. We're starting off with one of the most ambitious and dangerous secrets ever kept. The Manhattan Project. During World War II, the US government launched a massive secret operation to develop the world's first atomic bomb. Over 130,000 people worked on this project, but nearly all of them had no idea what they were really building. From Los Alamos, New Mexico to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, entire cities were built from scratch just to support this one mission. The secrecy was so intense that even Vice President Truman didn't know about the project until he became president after Roosevelt's death. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan, followed by a second in Nagasaki 3 days later. The bombs brought World War II to a devastating end, but for years, many of the people who worked on the project had no idea their efforts contributed to the deadliest weapon in human history. Even today, many aspects of the Manhattan Project remain shrouded in secrecy. It was a cover-up of epic proportions hidden right in plain sight. 9. Operation Northwoods, 1962, the US planned to attack itself. Now, imagine this. Your own government plotting to attack its own citizens just to start a war. Sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? But in 1962, that's exactly what was proposed in Operation Northwoods. At the height of Cold War tensions, US military leaders wanted a reason to invade Cuba and remove Fidel Castro from power. So they came up with a shocking plan: stage fake terrorist attacks on American soil, hijack planes, sink US ships, and even blow up civilians, all to blame Cuba and justify an invasion. Luckily, President John F. Kennedy rejected the plan outright, but here's the scary part. This proposal was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If JFK hadn't said no, Operation Northwoods could have gone forward, creating a crisis that never existed. For years, the American public had no idea how close they came to being used as pawns in a war that never happened. 8. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment from 1932 to 1972, the medical cover-up that betrayed hundreds. Coming in at number 8 is one of the most shameful cover-ups in US medical history, the Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. For 40 years, between 1932 and 1972, hundreds of African American men in Alabama were lied to by government doctors. They were told they were receiving free health care, but what they were actually a part of was a horrifying medical experiment. These men were never treated for syphilis, even though doctors knew how deadly the disease could be. Instead, the goal was to study how syphilis destroyed the human body over time. And here's the worst part. By the 1940s, penicillin had been discovered as a cure, but the men were deliberately denied treatment. The experiment continued for decades, resulting in death, blindness, insanity, and the transmission of the disease to their wives and children. It wasn't until 1972, 40 years later, that a whistleblower leaked the truth and the experiment was finally stopped. The US government didn't officially apologize until 1997. This horrifying experiment remains one of the darkest chapters in medical history, covered up for 4 decades. The lost city of Cahokia, America's forgotten civilization. Let's step back thousands of years to a cover-up that involves a lost civilization, right here in America. Just outside modern-day St. Louis lies Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. At its peak, Cahokia was bigger than London at the time, home to around 20,000 people and filled with massive earthen mounds. But for centuries, European settlers and later historians erased Cahokia from the record books. Why? Because the idea that Native American societies were this advanced didn't fit with the narrative colonizers wanted to promote. Cahokia wasn't just a big city, it was a cultural and economic hub with trade networks stretching all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Its people built huge structures and lived in an organized society, yet their achievements were almost completely forgotten. Today, archaeologists are still uncovering the truth about Cahokia, but for hundreds of years this ancient city was buried, literally and figuratively. Watergate, 1972. The scandal that toppled a president. At number 6, we have the infamous Watergate scandal, a cover-up so big it brought down a US president. In 1972, 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex. At first, it seemed like a simple burglary, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. President Richard Nixon and his administration were deeply involved in the break-in and tried to cover up their involvement. Secret recordings from inside the White House exposed Nixon's attempts to obstruct the investigation. As the scandal unfolded, it became clear that the President of the United States had abused his power to hide the truth. In 1974, Nixon became the first US president to resign from office, forever marking Watergate as one of the biggest political cover-ups in history. MKUltra, 1953 to 1973, the CIA's mind control experiments. Here's where things get really disturbing. For 20 years, the CIA ran a top-secret program known as MKUltra, and it was all about mind control. Under the guise of psychological research, the CIA conducted experiments on unsuspecting civilians, including the use of drugs like LSD, hypnosis, and extreme sensory deprivation. The goal? To see if they could control someone's mind, create a Manchurian Candidate-style assassin, or even extract confessions through drug-induced coercion. Many of the victims had no idea they were being experimented on, and some suffered severe mental damage as a result. When the program was exposed in the 1970s, the CIA quickly destroyed most of the records to cover up their tracks, leaving us with only scraps of the true horror that unfolded. In the 1980s, the US government found itself embroiled in another major cover-up, the Iran-Contra affair. It was a secret operation in which the US government sold arms to Iran, despite a strict arms embargo, and used the profits to fund Nicaraguan rebels, known as the Contras. And get this was all happening without Congress's approval, right under their noses. When the operation was exposed, it led to one of the biggest political scandals of the decade. President Ronald Reagan claimed he had no knowledge of the scheme, but the damage was done. Though several officials were convicted, many had their sentences overturned or were later pardoned, and the true extent of the scandal remains murky to this day. Coming in at number 3 is the Chernobyl disaster, a nuclear catastrophe the Soviet Union tried desperately to cover up. In April 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded, releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. At first, the Soviet government refused to admit the severity of the accident, even as people started getting sick. They tried to keep the disaster hidden, but within days, the radiation cloud spread across Europe and the truth couldn't be contained any longer. Thousands of people died from radiation poisoning and entire cities had to be evacuated, but it took the Soviet Union weeks to come clean. Today, Chernobyl stands as a chilling reminder of the dangers of both nuclear power and government cover-ups. At number 2, we have the Pentagon Papers, a secret government report that revealed the true scale of US involvement in the Vietnam War. In 1971, military analyst Daniel Ellsberg leaked thousands of pages of classified documents to the New York Times, exposing that the government had been lying to the public about the war for years. The papers showed that US leaders had secretly expanded the war into Cambodia and Laos, despite publicly claiming the opposite. This leak caused a national scandal and eroded trust in the government, especially since it revealed that officials had known the war was unwinnable long before they told the American people. The government fought hard to keep the Pentagon Papers secret, but thanks to Ellsberg's bravery, the truth was revealed. It remains one of the most important whistleblower moments in American history. And finally, at number 1, Roswell. Was it an alien crash or just a weather balloon? In 1947, something came down near Roswell, New Mexico, sparking rumors of extraterrestrial life. The US military quickly claimed it was just a weather balloon, but conspiracy theories have never gone away. Decades later, many still believe the government is hiding the truth about what really happened that night. Was it a UFO cover-up? You decide. And there you have it, the top 10 biggest cover-ups in history. Which one shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to hit that subscribe button for more mind-blowing stories just like these. You won't want to miss what's coming next.